Three things that Trump is doing should scare the hell out of Democrats. Hi, I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, that's the headline in the Washington Post over a Jonathan Capehart. I was going to call it a think piece, but I don't know Capehart well enough to know if he does that. But in any case, it is an opinion piece by Jonathan Capehart pointing out that there are three things that President Trump is doing that should be of deep concern to Democrats. And I want to just I'll give you a quick overview of what those three things are, and then maybe drill down a little bit into each of them. Basically, number one is he's raising a huge amount of money. Number two is that he is reaching out to Latinos, and there's a fascinating twist on that Capehart brings to bear on his argument. And number three is that he's reaching out to African Americans, and not just African Americans, but in particular, Black men.
Yep.
And all three of these things, Capehart says, should be of deep concern to Democrats. Do you share his analysis just on the surface of it before we drill into it?
I think he's 2/3 right.
And which 2/3?
The last two. The fact that Donald Trump has raised all this money is always considered to be by political analysts, well, he has a bigger war chest than the other guy has. I don't think that really matters, honestly. I don't think by the time you get to Election Day, I don't think there are many people who's not aware of who's running for president and need to see a TV ad to remind them who's who.
Well, and in a sense, because Donald Trump is the king of what they call earned media. In other words, he's the king of media he doesn't have to pay for.
And that's why he became president of the United States in the face of the biggest political war chest in the history of the nation, in the history of the world, obviously. Hillary Clinton's budget in 2016 was by far the largest political spend in the history of the world. And she still lost. You can only imagine how that feels.
So just the Latino outreach and the Black outreach you think are the biggest threats?
Number two, the Latino outreach should scare the hell out of Democrats, and the Black outreach ought to terrify them. I mean, terrify them. This is, I have said it before and I'll say it again. Kanye West and his acceptance, his open acceptance of Donald Trump and his now apparently his conversion to Christianity is the most important thing that has happened in the United States of America since the election of Donald Trump. It is absolutely fundamentally critically important. And the reason it's critically important has not got anything to do with Kanye West's moral influence or anything. It's just simple mathematics now. Okay, simple math. The Democrats, in order to win national elections like the President of the United States, must carry 85% of the Black vote or higher. Once you get below 80%, it's very, very doubtful for them. And if you get significantly below, like to 70%, then the Democrats never win another presidential election again, ever.
Well, because of your ranking of this, let's take them in reverse order.
Sure.
And in fact, Hillary Clinton received some 90% of the Black vote. However, when you picture Black voters for Democrats in the United States, the picture that comes to mind is a female voter. And in fact, they have been the heart and soul of the Black Democratic coalition. 90 points. Hillary beat Donald Trump by 90 points with Black women, but just 69 points with Black men. Now, still, President Trump is nowhere near the popularity he said he would have by his reelection. He said he'd have 95% of the Black vote. He's at about 11% right now, but that's up from 8% in the 2016 election. The Capehart makes the point in this article, Bill, that President Trump does not have to win the Black vote. He just has to chip away at it.
Yeah. I mean, the numbers I thought for Mitt Romney looked pretty good in 2012, but it turns out that Black voters came out in large numbers to support Barack Obama, and that cost Romney the election. A lot of people on the conservative side sat that one out. So we got another 4 years of Barack Obama. But certainly, that enthusiasm from the Black community does not continue on past Barack Obama onto Hillary Clinton, as she's found out, although obviously the election was lost because of Russian bots on Facebook. Yeah, something. I know. Check the papers. Let me know what it is.
Do you think that Black men in particular may be responsive to the message that says the Democratic Party left you? Welcome to the Republican Party. They feel perhaps more alienated from their at least nominal party than would the average female Black voter?
Well, first of all, the average female Black voter is taking home a whole lot more money than she did under Barack Obama. And understandably, if you've got Barack Obama in the race, if you'll pardon the expression, then that is a very, very heavy magnet, very heavy pull. Considering the history of the country, and we don't need to go into the whole history of the country, but you can understand how a black voter seeing a black candidate running for president would that candidate would earn their enthusiasm. So that's not happening anymore. So the question is, how do they feel about Hillary? How do they feel about the 2020 candidate? But the bottom line is that during, again, I'm close on the numbers, not exactly right, but during 8 years of Barack Obama, the average American took home $1,000, $1,200 extra at the end of 8 years. In 2.5 years, they've taken home $5,600 in 2.5 years. So everybody is making
low levels of black
unemployment. Right. Now, if you really want to get down into the muck with this, then my position would be this. If you had Barack Obama on the ticket again, or some other extremely charismatic black nominee for president, that might outweigh the economic advance that Donald Trump has and the unemployment advantages that he has. But I don't see anybody on that stage who's going to be able to pull that off. And so you have to ask yourself now, I'll get back to Kanye in a second. If you're one of these working class Democrats who loathes Donald Trump, are you going to go out for Elizabeth Warren or Bernie or Biden or whatever, knowing that it's going to probably cost you large hunk of your paycheck and probably your job if past performance is any indication of future growth, So I don't see how they have anybody with anything like the charisma necessary to overcome Donald Trump's real world economic advantage, which has been spectacular. But more importantly is the black male vote. And the reason this is more important is because it's more movable. Kanye West supporting Donald Trump. If I had sat in a room for 6 months with a pad and a piece of paper, I think the first name I would have written down, if I had to get somebody in the pop culture, the first name I would have written down would have been Kanye West. And I think after 6 months, it'd still be the only name on the list. For him to support Donald Trump gives permission to the entire population of America, the entire black population of America. He's giving them permission to vote for Donald Trump. He is giving them
So you think there may be an additional sort of groundswell of support from within that, and I hate doing these demographic cohorts.
So do I.
But that's just the way it happens.
That's the way they're playing it.
So you think there may be a lot more sort of underlying support for the president that they're not going to tell any pollster, but in the privacy of the ballot box or the voting booth, things may turn out differently than the pollsters expect.
Yeah, I'm not really willing to say that there's like this kind of shadow, movement for Trump, or I don't want to really go down that road. It's not really what I'm saying. What I am saying, though, is that in 2012, 2-3 days after Romney lost, I'd said if Romney had gone to a black church in Southern Philadelphia and stood there and said, I'm Mitt Romney, this is what I believe. I think that these policies are best for you. What do you think? He could have won the election, but he didn't do that. But I did see Donald Trump in a black church, and he looked the one quality that I have never, ever seen a white liberal look in terms of emotional state in the company of black Americans. I've never, ever, ever seen a high-level white liberal look comfortable with black people, with regular black voters. But Donald Trump seemed very comfortable with them in his appearance in some of those churches in 2016. And that's not something you can fake.
And here's the story in those numbers, by the way, Bill, and this is from that Jonathan Capehart piece in the Washington Post. A Wisconsin State Journal study of the 2016 election put raw numbers behind the statistics. Republican Donald Trump received 2,700 fewer votes than 2012 GOP nominee Mitt Romney. However, Democrat Hillary Clinton received almost 239,000 fewer votes than President Barack Obama did, with much of the decline coming in Milwaukee.
There's the election. So the reason I'm optimistic is because as far as this battle goes, the fact that Donald Trump made an appearance in a black church in the last election cycle, and the fact that he looked and felt comfortable doing it. And by the way, you may have noticed that while he was there, he didn't put on a Southern accent and start talking about the bottle of hot sauce that he carries around in his jacket pocket the whole time, the way Hillary Clinton claims she had a bottle of hot sauce wherever she goes in her purse, y'all. So condescension is something that most people can pick up readily. And I think as a social cohort, again, I don't like breaking these things down this way, but that's the way they want to play the game. I think as a social cohort, I think Black Americans are especially finely tuned to pick up condescension because they've gotten a lot of it. And the entire strategy of the Democrats has been, we are terrible for your communities. All of the cities that we've run for 70, 80, 90, 100 years now, there are 8,000 Black people murdered in this country every single year. And that's 2 Iraq wars a year, total Iraq wars. And those people are being killed in Democratic-controlled cities. And you should have thrown us out of office a long, long, long time ago, except that the Republicans are worse because they're racists. And if we had an educational system in this country that said that, Abraham Lincoln was a Republican, and that's shocking news to some people today, shocking, that, Frederick Douglass was a Republican, that the first people ever elected to the House and the Senate were Republicans, and they went there in 1867, not 1967, 1867, that the Confederacy was the Democratic Party that left the Union, that all of the Jim Crow laws were the product of Democrats in the Deep South, that the entire failure of Reconstruction and the entire reestablishment of racially designated governance in the 100 years after the Civil War was due to Democrats murdering Republicans in the South in order to keep them indoors. If you told those people that the people who were turning those water hoses on those Black girls trying to go to college back in 1964, that the people behind the hoses were Democrats, they would simply fall out of their chairs. They wouldn't believe you. So this is the advantage of controlling all of the information that people get. But unfortunately for them, very unfortunately for them, they have run into a guy who has figured out, I'm not saying he sat down and figured it out. Let me rephrase that because it's important. It's an important distinction. It's not that Donald Trump has figured out how to go around the news media. It's that Donald Trump is the only person who is when I say constitutionally, I mean internally constitutionally, not big constitution.
Not the document, yes.
But he's the only person with the physical constitution, the emotional makeup necessary to be able to fly in the face of that kind of moral, social proof of peer pressure. Every single Republican I've ever seen has backed down when they started talking about something that needed to be talked about, and they were called racist for it. And the reason Donald Trump is president of the United States was he said there are illegal aliens in this country who are committing terrible crimes, and he didn't back down from it.
So speaking of those folks, since they're primarily Hispanic or Latino, the immigrants and the illegal aliens, this is Jonathan Capehart's second point, but we'll deal with it last here. He says that the Trump outreach to the Latino community has the potential to be tremendously effective because Latinos who are tired of being other may want to embrace voting for President Trump as, in the phrase he uses, as de facto white membership. In essence, voting for Trump makes you virtually white, and he compares this to 100 years ago, Italians and Irish and Jews who essentially wanted to assimilate. They wanted to become American. They didn't want to be those outsiders anymore. And he said, if enough of these Latinos, Capehart says, if enough of these Latinos see voting for Trump as kind of an expression of their being embraced by this country, then that would possibly be enough to throw a state like Florida.
Who did this guy? Who did he write the article for? This guy,
the Washington Post.
Oh, imagine, yeah, because you'd have to go to either the Post or the Times to find something that dense, that kind of sophisticated, high level, highly educated kind of stupid. You have to go. That kind of stupid's not lying around on the streets. You have to go pretty high up to get to that level.
I would think for you anyway, as somebody who's a conservative, you would kind of embrace the idea that there would be immigrants who said, you know what, I don't want to be a Latino American. I want to be an American.
Yes, and this has nothing to do with that, which is why I'm telling you what a stupid comment that is on behalf of this guy. The idea that voting for the white guy in order to feel like Americans and citing the examples of the Italians, the Irish, and all the other immigrants that came into the country earlier is a bit of a surprise to me, because it seemed to me, I'm not up on my history the way that these guys who write for the Washington Post are, Shirley, but it seemed to me that prior to the election of Barack Obama in 2008, you had a choice of nothing but white guys. So which white guy are you voting for as an immigrant in 1903 or 1904 to show that you're an American? Is it the Democratic white guy or the Republican white guy? This kind of argument is absolutely precisely why they're going to have their butts handed to them on a platter.
He doesn't explicitly say voting for the white guy. I think
he
sees President Trump as more of an expression of white America than any Democrat could be, no matter how blanched that Democrat might be.
So what you're saying is that he says that Donald Trump is perceived to be more of a representative of white America.
And the mainstream of America, yeah.
Okay.
Just kind of your expression.
So in other words, he's the white guy. And this idea that they're doing it to feel acceptance is the kind of patronizing, patronizing liberal progressive attitude towards anybody in this country, anybody. It's this kind of, we got to put on our white gloves now and talk about what they want as immigrants and what is the Latino position on this and what's the Latino position on that and how do the blacks feel about this and so on. When in point of fact, the world is much closer to our philosophy. I'd like to remind you that Scott Ott works for us and we pay him to be a jerk. It's much, much closer to our philosophy. In other words, if I have a black business owner, a Latino business owner, an Asian business owner, and a white business owner, they have a lot more in common as business owners than they do with other white people or Japanese people or black people or Hispanic people who aren't. It's based on what are your individual needs. People vote their own self-interest, and that's a good thing. That's why life is here. So the question is it in the self-interest of this artificially selected Latino vote that they've decided to play with? The question isn't going to be, well, what are the Latinos going to do? What a degrading, just kind of a disgusting kind of a thing in general is that the Latinos are going to do this because the Latinos want this, and the blacks are going to do this because the blacks are going to do that. What's going to happen is individual people are going to go to the polls and they're going to step into a booth and they're going to try and decide what's best for them and best for their families. And every single person in this country is going to do that with the same motivation. And Donald Trump has shown, he hasn't talked about, he's shown that he provides higher standard of living and lower levels of unemployment for both blacks and Hispanics and women. And if this guy is telling me that, oh, no, they're not going to vote because they actually have a job now, or they're not going to vote because they actually are getting paid 2.5 times what they usually get paid. No. They're going to do it because they, as a group of Latinos, the hive mind of the Latinos, God only knows what goes on in there, the hive mind of the Latinos has decided that we need to make this political statement so that we can feel better about ourselves. It's all a bunch of malarkey, and I'm tired of hearing educated people talk this way. So it's going to come down to, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And the answer across the board is yes. And the point is that of all of the political people on the scene right now who are running for president or who are sitting presidents, there's only one person out there. I mean it. There's only one person on the board who has the ability to talk to people as individuals. And that person is Donald Trump. There's no question about it in my mind. That's why Kanye West decided to support him, because Kanye West likes him. Because Kanye West likes him. That's why. And you have to have an ego the size of Kanye West to admit in front of everybody on camera that you support a Republican who everybody else has been told is a racist. And I'd like to go through this math one last time just to close this episode. The reason that this is so important is very simple. The Democrats are telling you that the only people that vote for Donald Trump are white racists. Kanye West votes for Donald Trump. Therefore, Kanye West is a white racist. See how simple it is? And if you break that chain of logic that you're being sold all the time by saying, I think of all the people in the world that have legitimate street cred with the black community, I can't think of anybody off the top of my head who comes in higher than Kanye West. For Kanye West to say, I support Donald Trump, he's basically saying, I guess I'm a white nationalist too. Since you're telling us it's only people who vote for him, I guess I must be a white nationalist too. And that's when people's eyeballs kick in, Scott. That's when people's actual eyeballs kick in and say, now, wait a minute. Hold on. He doesn't look like a white nationalist racist to me. because I'm looking at him. And when you can start to connect to people's eyeballs, and it becomes a question of, are you going to believe them or your own lying eyes? Then you have a very, very good situation ahead of you. And I cannot wait for Donald Trump to actually start the campaign in these communities. He's going to cream them.
Our friends at the Patriot Post, America's News Digest, have helped to make this episode possible, as well as the members at BillWhittle.com and our friends, patrons over at Patreon.com/Bill Whittle, all of whom have come together because they want to see these kinds of conversations advanced and spread around the world. And a bunch of those folks are going to be joining us shipboard on the Navigator of the Seas from May 15th to May 18th, a Caribbean cruise.
We're on a boat.
We're on a boat. And as Bill has pointed out, I think it's a tough, I guess if you had the contest between, are people more excited to be on this cruise because they get to meet Bill Whittle or because they get to meet the members at BillWhittle.com? And I think that we're going to find out that it may be close to equal.
My wife is certainly more excited about meeting the members at BillWhittle.com than she is about spending time with me.
It is tough sometimes being a conservative and being somebody who's passionate about these issues and feeling like you're isolated and you're out there. And it is great not only to get together with other people who are like-minded, but frankly, just to relax for a little bit and have some fun.
Laugh at these lunatics and losers.
All rant and no play makes Bill a dull boy. And so he is looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it, as well as Stephen Green. If you'd like to sign up for that cruise, you can go to BillWhittle.com or BillWhittleCruise.com. Either way, and you can't miss the great big white boat. Just click that, and it'll take you to the place you need to go so you can sign up. We look forward to meeting you on that ship and enjoying a couple of days of just great relaxation as well as great conversations. So for Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members for making this possible.
And if the engines go down, I'll just breathe into the turbines. I'll just speak into the turbines. 200,000 shaft horsepower of hot air coming.